Hello, my name is Ryan Craig. I'm the owner of QC's Building Services. I'm a licensed building and timber pest inspector, and I've been doing residential property inspections for around 20 years. This video is designed to provide people with some quality key information in relation to a very important issue with residential properties, and that is corrosion, and also some of the factors and elements about corrosion that are relevant and can be done to acknowledge what it is and reduce the risks of suffering loss, financial loss, by being proactive in managing it. So what is corrosion? The explanation of corrosion really is the deterioration of a material, which is predominantly metal but can involve some other materials, by electrochemical oxidation of the metal in reaction with an oxidant like oxygen or sulfates. It's very relevant to residential construction or properties because we have a lot of metals that are present within this line of construction. We can have structural beams, roof cladding, fasteners, lots of stuff. For the very reason that it's relevant and it has a deteriorating effect on materials, and it can cost significant financial loss if it's not managed properly, we would strongly recommend that all property owners understand what corrosion is, understand what it can do if they don't manage it properly, and also treat it with the respect that it should be treated with so they can be proactive and avoid the potential of suffering loss, which we see time and time again carrying out inspections. If people were more aware of it and respectful of corrosion, being the fact it's such a prominent part of residential properties, they would avoid the financial loss that we see them avoid later on. So what materials are commonly affected by corrosion? You can have some of them are roofing materials. There's a lot of roofing materials can be affected. The cladding, the roof sheeting can be affected over time, particularly for older properties. The roof screws are often affected. The fasteners for the roof sheeting, the guttering and downpipes if they're metal, that will be exacerbated and increased if there's issues like the guttering isn't graded properly to the downpipes and ponding water stays in the gutters. That will increase the corrosive environment and nature for corrosion to occur, so that's got to be avoided. And if there's debris and vegetation left in roofing gutters and downpipes, it'll also block them and trap water and increase corrosion. So make sure you're proactive and you clean out your gutters and downpipes to avoid that happening. Steel columns in isolated pierced steel footings, columns in subfloor areas are often known to be prone to corrosion, significantly compounded or increased the threat of corrosion where there's inadequate drainage or there's excessive moisture at the base of the steel columns. So be aware of that. Older galvanized plumbing pipes are also known to be subject to corrosion, either pressure or sewer pipes. Structural beams that are used for properties can be known to be subject to corrosion, particularly those that aren't treated or they're not primed. And capping materials for termite control measures is another one. A lot of fasteners, fittings and structural bolts are subject to corrosion over time, and they're very important for tying in and keeping the integrity of a property. Metals used in close proximity to saltwater environments like coastal or swimming pools, they will advance in terms of corroding very quickly, actually, based on our experiences. You've got to be very aware of that. If you've got a swimming pool that's saltwater or if coastal, then your materials used that are not corrosive, they don't have anti-corrosion qualities like stainless steel, will corrode faster. So it's very important you be aware and use the right materials in those areas to eliminate the risk of using materials that are corrosive prone, and then you'll be needing to spend money replacing them very quickly if you're in those environments. Some common causes of corrosion, as I said, properties near coastal areas or near saltwater pools with high levels of salt in the atmosphere, using incompatible or corrosive susceptible materials near those areas, any materials that are susceptible to corrosion that are used and are subjected to excessive levels of water, like steel columns in subfloor areas, and an incompatibility of materials used during construction by contractors. This is not what property owners can do, but there needs to be a better understanding of licensed contractors carrying out work, what materials can be used and when they can't be, and if they use the wrong materials, that corrosion will occur. The best example of this is what's called galvanic reaction for each type of metal. Some metals can't go together because they'll rust. It's called a galvanic reaction, and an example of that is if you use zinc aluminum roof sheets and you have that roof water from that zinc aluminum going into galvanized gutters, that will result in rust. Funnily enough, if you use galvanized roof sheets and you go into zinc aluminum gutters, it won't cause rust. So contractors really need to be aware of this a bit better, and understand as a homeowner, for any work that is done in the future, that make sure you've got good materials in place that are anti-corrosive, and the workmen don't use materials that are susceptible to corrosion or will cause corrosion, as I see in some cases. The other thing that can cause corrosion to occur is a lack of proactiveness by the property owner. Clean out your gutters. Make sure that if you're in an area with lots of vegetation and there's leaves falling down, that you get up there once a month and clean the gutters out, so that you're going to avoid the risks of water being stuck and corrosion occurring quicker. Use of inappropriate building materials, like I've said, and poor workmanship as well. Another example that can cause corrosion is, again, from contractors. If they do a job and they could avoid the possibility of corrosion by treating a material or metal with an anti-corrosive paint, but they don't, then they will increase the risk of corrosion occurring. So poor workmanship can also result in corrosion occurring quicker. If there was a higher level of care and attention done at the time the job was done with an application of anti-corrosive paint on a material that is susceptible to corrosion, clearly that's going to be better than not, but it's not always done. The effects of corrosion on material, obviously it'll deteriorate the material. If it's subject to excessive levels of corrosion, depending on what the material is, that's of course unless it's a material that's not corrosive prone, like stainless steel, then it'll result in repairs as a minimum, and in some cases it can result in replacement where it's more significant, the corrosion, and that can result in quite a lot of cost if it's a material that's a structural element, like steel columns. If there's a lot of corrosion in steel columns and it's caused deterioration to the point that they need to be replaced, you're up for tens of thousands of dollars. That's not overly common, but can happen. Another effect of corrosion, it can compromise the roofing materials, which are predominantly metal, and if they're left unchecked, leakage can come in, and obviously any water permeation through those areas where it's corroded will cause interior damage to the materials. And funny enough, when you think about water, we need it to survive, but in terms of building materials, if corrosive elements fail and let water come into the structure, water will just destroy almost everything in a building. Like plasterboard will deteriorate, electrical it'll ruin, it'll cause decay on timber, it'll rust metal. Basically, the golden rule with water is keep it out of the structure because it's deadly for building materials. So make sure your roof is always in a good condition, because it's subject to a lot of rainwater and needs to do a job. Where steel is used for footings and or integrity of a structure, always try and use materials that are the best quality. Don't use prime-coated steel columns. Use galvanized. It'll cost more, but your levels of risk for corrosion in the future are greatly reduced. So understand that. So what can cause the effect of the corrosion is if you use incompatible materials or materials that are inferior, then you're going to have a big effect on the footings and the structure, which can require tens of thousands of dollars to fix. Corrosion can also have an effect of weakening the structural integrity of a property where materials are compromised, like that are crucial for the integrity of the structure, like fixtures, fastenings, beams, anything that's weakened by corrosion. The whole global effect of the property can in turn weaken the structure. So it can also have an effect on the tie down and the structural integrity of a property where corrosion causes deterioration to fasteners and fixtures. As per all of the previous examples, be aware of that as a property owner and know of the damage it can do and costs it can involve, and be proactive to avoid that. If you have a good program in place to inspect your property and identify corrosion early and get on top of it, you're going to potentially save the need to spend thousands of dollars at some stage in the future. The recommendations I would give for people that are dealing with corrosion is, again, be proactive, take proactive measures, have an inspection program where you identify and carry out rectification so that corrosion doesn't develop. For any existing materials that are in place, treat them with an anti-corrosive paint. For any existing materials that are in place that are subject to possible corrosion, if they're not treated with an anti-corrosive paint, treat them with a paint, because you're going to prolong their life and reduce corrosion affecting them. For any new construction that's done, make sure your contractors and workmen use materials that are anti-corrosive and employ workmanship that will reduce the risks of corrosion occurring, like give materials that are prone to corrosion that are metal a paint with an anti-corrosive paint. Also, eliminate any environments that are known to cause corrosion at a property. A good one is drainage. If there's water coming into a subsoil area, that will have an effect on the steel columns and probably cause them to rust. And in the worst case scenario, you'll be up for thousands of dollars to rectify that. If you jump on top of that and you fix your drainage, you're going to greatly reduce the risks of corrosion having an effect on your steel columns. So be proactive and eliminate any environment that might be present to cause corrosion. Any failures to do these things could potentially result in a property owner suffering repairs, rectifications needing to be done, and in some cases that can result in thousands of dollars necessary for more significant components of buildings like roof, cladding, and in particular the footings for the structure, i.e. steel columns. Yep, so I hope you found this video informative in relation to the use of metal and corrosion and what you can do and manage and proactive things you can do. And thank you for watching, and if you're buying a property in the future, we'd certainly love to help you out with that. Cheers.